you guys are viewing this. One is that his political opinions in a political post may apply to his opinions non-political in a non-political post, which I think is a natural assumption to make, right? Theoretically, the way that we aspire, both as law students and in our practice, to view the law is that you apply the law to the facts, right? So should that be partisan at any point? And the answer is probably not. Does it happen to end up being partisan in certain situations? Yes. So it may be relevant, but it's only going to be relevant to a degree, because obviously every Supreme Court justice came from somewhere. They had some certain background that one side or the other would have viewed as disqualifying. They end up being Supreme Court justices anyway. Does their jurisprudence on the Supreme Court always align with that prior affiliation? No. There are plenty of Bush appointees, for example, who are the ones currently standing in the way of Trump laws that are being sued for now. So that's kind of the first thing I would point out. The second thing I would point out, with the requests for more documentation on Kavanaugh's Bush era information, this kind of goes to a theory of discovery that you'll learn both in law school and in practice, which is in large-scale lawsuits where you have the opportunity to make discovery requests for large volumes of documents. When someone is responding to that request, there's two options of how to proceed. One is to call it a fishing expedition and say, listen, your discovery request is so broad that it can't possibly be relevant to what we're talking about here today. And to say to the court, there's no way this is relevant, we have to narrow it, we can't possibly produce all these documents. That's option one. Option two is a little sneakier. And what it involves is saying, sure, have them. We'll give you millions of documents, but our schedule is going to stay the same. You know, 3 weeks to review 7 million documents or something. That encourages settlement more times than not, because no one's going to read those 7 million documents. There are requirements now. In Minnesota, for example, we've gone to e-discovery. There's requirements for what discoverable documents have to be, which includes searchable PDFs, for example. So one of the articles that that was linked in our show sheet here had talked about how there's this many documents, a few 100,000 that are available. There's this many more, a higher number, 100,000 that are being worked on. And so they're clearly trying to make it available to the best that they can, but who is going to read those documents, and what information do you glean from that volume of material? And I think that is a question that you actually want to ask, because to your point, Hannah, of who's going to read that, probably nobody. It's just like when legislation is hundreds of pages thick. No one's going to ever read that, and that's part of the point of it, is to make it so hard to navigate that it doesn't actually get read. Maybe the nomination passes anyway and no one's read those million documents. So part of what I think we're talking about is a discovery issue that there's two views on. One is narrow your search, and one is give them all the documents they want. They've taken the narrow your search approach, where you could just give up all those documents and maybe get the same result.
Yeah. I don't think you even need, the funny thing is, I think to prove what they want to prove about Kavanaugh is that he's an incredibly political nominee, more so than many in the past. And I mean, not all, a lot of them are very political, but that's already proven by the documents that are available, by the major cases, by his switch, between the Clinton administration and the Bush administration on his views of, executive power and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like they're delaying the inevitable. He's gonna get through. I'm more cynical about the operation of justice. I do think that a lot of them are there with a political mission,
sure,
and to fulfill a political agenda.
And I think though that is what the system is partially set up for. If we wanted a system that was apolitical, you could really have computers do all of this, right? You could have it find the criteria of the case, analyze it against the Constitution or whatever law there is at the time, what statute applies, and spit out a result. But that's not the system we have set up, and there's a reason for that. We want a human influence. We want humans on the court who are judging these cases. unfortunate result of that is that you have humans on the court that are judging these cases, and they bring in their own experiences. But no matter where you land on Kavanaugh as a person, the court as a whole is a human court of people who have been lawyers. Those lawyers practice law in whatever way they practice law, whether it is more conservative or more progressive. And that's the system that we have set up.
I would love to see the justice algorithms that I'm sure like
The
Bezos
computer.
and like Musk are working on right now.
Right.
Oh
Yeah.
man,
Those would be
Elon
great
Musk
to
Supreme
see.
Court.
it's going to be just
Get them on it, man.
fascinating.
working
I
on
mean, I'm sure there's no question that they're already working on it. Like legal algorithms, justice algorithms, like computer judges. It's all like it's in our future.
Now, Lacey, do you agree with the I guess the argument that he's probably even more political than the other Supreme Court justices that have been put on there, just by I mean, I think we discussed last time that he was involved in the recount, he was involved in the impeachment of Clinton. I mean, do you think
Within Bush's office.
Yeah, worked very closely within Bush's office, got an appointment through there. I mean, do you think that's a little more political than we've seen in a Supreme Court justice?
So I don't think that all those reasons make it more political, but I do think there is some clever timing, unfortunate timing maybe, to appointing someone for a Supreme Court justice position who has specifically dealt with the issue of crime in the White House, right? Like, it is undeniable today that this is going to be something that's going to come up in the next few years. It's pretty much the path is paved. So it is quite a good long game to play to put someone in who has dealt with White House crime. Whether that results in them viewing any particular White House crime in the future in one way or another, we don't know. There have been conservative appointees who have gone against the White House, and that's how the system is supposed to work. Again, you're supposed to apply the law to the facts. But I do think that the timing is certainly more suspicious than that.
Yeah, well, and his like explicit in the Minnesota Law Review article actually, where he like pretty explicitly came out against any sort of prosecution of a president for
Right, and
while they were in office.
And this is all naturally a jurisprudence that can evolve over time, and that's the one problem of putting someone from maybe a more political position into a position where we're going to have to see the evolution of their jurisprudence over time, is that we don't really know how to predict that. Whereas when you're putting like a federal judge or someone in a more traditional role into that, you have some indicators to go on. And so, yeah, I agree. It's going to be, should he be confirmed, it's going to be something to watch, because who knows where he's going to fall in those lines.
Yeah, he's just not a good writer either. I don't like to read his opinion.
Just remember that when you're writing for school, because that's going to come up in your brain again.
There was this one McDonald's case that he wrote the opinion. I was reading it. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I mean, from the first sentence, it was just like, this is terrible. Said something about brawls in the D.C. area being a not uncommon occurrence on weekend nights, or something.
Okay.
To that, something to that.
It's a strong hook.
Yeah, it was very, it was hook, line, and sinker. I did not finish reading the article.
Wasn't it Scalia that had really great hooks in his
Some
in his
people
He
opinions?
was always.
Argle Bargle was one of his
Yeah.
famous.
Argle Bargle?
Argle Bargle was in one of his opinions. I think it might have been in Heller, which is one of the. I think it's one of the Guns cases.
Yep.
It was Argle
Second
Bargle.
Amendment cases, yeah.
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 Argle Bargle.
Yeah, a lot of people think that he is a great writer. Even, people who don't agree with his jurisprudence or whatever.
Right.
I found a lot of it obnoxious, but you never know. Like,
Yeah, he likes to take
people
shots.
have their own styles.
I am personally entertained by any Supreme Court justice that likes to take shots, because it makes it that much more entertaining for me to read, especially when they're very subtle shots.
Yeah.
But I can see how it can also become obnoxious
Mhm.
when you're in law school, for example, and reading them over
Yeah.
and over and over and over.
It's not as bad as there was this one case that I remember reading where it was like a baseball case, and the judge just thought he was like so clever, and he used like 6 baseball metaphors throughout the.
Have you read the Leanne Rimes case?
No.
Oh, there's a civil procedure case, a famous civil procedure case, where Leanne Rimes, I think, was suing Sony or some version, something like that, and the judge, or more likely the clerk, wrote the opinion to the tune of one of her songs.
Okay.
And our civil procedure professor, James Pielmeyer, who I think has since retired, like played the song and read it to the song in class, and we were all looking around like, is this happening right now? What is? It was like 10 in the morning, and we were not ready for that to happen to us.
That's
That's
kind of
amazing.
Look that one up.
That I endorse.
It's a
That is
fascinating
cool.
one.
Write that down. Write that
There's
down.
a case that references Taylor Swift a bunch too, I think.
Oh,
Ooh,
we'll be
be a good
doing that.
one.
But at least 2 of my law professors were like weirdly obsessed with Taylor Swift, like men over 50.
That are obsessed with
Yeah,
Taylor Swift.
it was like a common topic of conversation. Though to be fair, like a lot of people are.
You know the Taylor Swift case where the guy grabbed her inappropriately and then he sued her and he lost really bad? He used to be on a radio station in Minnesota.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh.
I did
So-
not even know about
Let's
that.
not claim that connection.
so interesting.
What else you got? News,
So
Brian?
speaking of judges that likes to throw shots, I want to skip down to the Paul Manafort trial because I just find this extremely entertaining. And it's not even like Paul Manafort. I don't know if he's even in the room because seriously, it seems to be all about this judge and
Can't be the room.
the prosecutor. And I think it's just like a great. I think it'd be a great movie or TV episode if it ever got to that. So I kind of just wanted to read a little bit from Politico, where the story from Josh Gersten. He basically wrote this article about what happened at the trial. So the U.S. District Court Judge T.S. Ellis, I believe he's a Reagan appointee, he was cracking the whip at the prosecutors in the Manafort fraud trial, prodding them again and again to keep the case moving forward and dropping matters that were irrelevant. The prosecutors got very frustrated at the judge, and the lead prosecutor was Andres. And he sometimes lashed back at the judge. This is something that apparently lawyers rarely do. Lacey, I don't know if that's true in your case or not.
I refuse to comment on that. There's judges out there who will tell you all about it, though.
So the first significant altercation came as Andres sought to question Manafort's former deputy Rick Gates about his travel. And Ellis came back to the prosecutor and said, let's get to the heart of the matter. And then, Judge, we've been at the heart of the matter, Andres replied before the judge cut him off. Just listen to me. Don't speak when I'm speaking, the judge said sharply. He added that he didn't see how the testimony and travel amounts to a hill of beans with regards to the charges against Manafort, who was, of course, as you all know, a former Trump's campaign chairman. The judge urged the two sides to agree on some stuff. Ellis wondered out loud why they hadn't been done and why it hadn't been done. The question seemed rhetorical, but Andres went ahead and answered it anyway, somewhat snarky. He said, for one, no one's asked for that before. And then the judge shot back, I am. I'd like to find ways to expedite the trial in this matter. Andres said, we've done everything we can to move the trial along, and I think we've succeeded. So, it seems like clashes between the judge and the prosecutor might be a little risky, I guess, to me. Lacey, I don't know if you find this as a good strategy for them at all, and is it ever in the interest of a prosecutor to ever kind of lash back at a judge?
So it probably seems right now like a clash between the prosecutor and the judge because we're in the prosecutor's case in chief at this point. So the defense hasn't really had a chance to bring up the judge's ire at all. The